Hello, I'm Dr. Catherine Horton. Previously I made a video about fighting psychopaths, and now I would like to step up the game and talk about fighting psychopathic systems. The difference is that if you're fighting a psychopath, you're literally just dealing with one of them. When you're fighting a psychopathic system, you're dealing with a system that is in deep capture, and you don't just have one psychopath, you have many at the top, 3, maybe more. And not just that, you have networked psychopaths within the system, and depending on what system you're dealing with, they might be networked externally as well. So when we're talking about the intelligence agencies, they have informants, infiltrators everywhere in society, in the judiciary, in police stations. So when the intelligence agencies end up in deep capture by clinical psychopaths, you are dealing with a networked set of many psychopaths. So in a sense, you're not just dealing with one Harold Shipman or one Hannibal Lecter, you're dealing with an entire gang of them. And if that weren't bad enough, they are also networked with other Hannibal Lecters or Harold Shipmans, you know, Jack the Rippers, around the country working together. So it is a bit scary. It's probably the most, it's the hardest thing a democracy actually can grapple with, you know, short of war. In a sense, this is even more dangerous than war because the enemy is on the inside. It has already infiltrated all the systems. So that's what we are dealing with, unfortunately, given the high number of women and children who seem to be mutilated, murdered, and and have all this fancy tech somehow pumped into them and being mutilated with it afterwards. So finding out how to fight psychopathic systems is really important. And just like in the last video, I would like to talk about it in general terms and use specific examples to actually come and come to a conclusion. Now, it is, in the previous video I explained what defines clinical psychopaths. It's essentially their total lack of empathy on one hand, and on the other hand it's also the way they try to control communication. They try to isolate victims, and then they try to have a close grip on these victims. And I also discussed in previous videos about where psychopaths accumulate in old systems and pyramidal, very hierarchical systems. They naturally drift to the top. And I also explained how, for example, the army, because it's so old and it's so hierarchical, by now for sure it is in deep capture by clinical psychopaths. Which is not really surprising, because if you want to, run a war and have someone decide to go and murder thousands, if not millions of people somewhere else, they have to be a total psychopath to actually do that. So it goes without saying that we have clinical psychopaths at the heads of the army. Then the second question is, okay, well, if that's the case, and I've already discussed how military parades and the weird goose stepping or other weirdness, and how military uniform, if it's really ridiculous and is humiliating the soldiers, how that's already a telltale sign of clinical psychopaths. But then if you see, this is more static, it's kind of like the it's inscribed in the system, if you like, that they are there into its history. But are there any signs of psychopathic behavior live? And now, not about the actual soldiers. So previously I already showed detailed video footage where I think one can safely say that the soldiers who were taking the actions were for sure clinical psychopaths. But are there any indications of psychopathic behavior in the leadership? Now, the one example I would like to bring up, which is actually just so very typical and also shows how to fight psychopathic systems, is essentially exactly the example of the US Army. I think the same, by the way, the same applies. Most of these examples that I pick out, if they happen to come from a particular country, it's not because I think that particular country is, in deep capture. I think all countries around the world are in deep capture by now by clinical psychopaths. So there will not be a difference. If you are in, South Africa or somewhere in Asia, and don't feel left out, because everything I say here will apply to you. Conversely, if you're in the US and you feel like I'm picking on the US, don't be offended. It's because most of the YouTube videos I can find as examples and most of the news articles come from the US. But I will also try to do my absolute best to pick on the UK and Germany as well, and if I can also on Switzerland, in equal measure. So I'll try to do that. When I don't manage, don't take it personally. I'm not against one particular type of army. I'm not particularly against one particular type of nationality. And I don't think one is, predisposed to deep capture by clinical psychopaths any more than others. I think they're all equally bad. So, but the US Army, I will pick now because there was a news report that essentially the generals in the US Army, and not just the army, I think just in general in the military. So take the Air Force, the Navy, whatever you want to pick. Everywhere the admirals and generals started complaining that their soldiers, the personnel, was on social media, and that was really bad for morale. Now, staying in touch with loved ones is usually good for morale. So what was the problem of these people? Well, it goes to the very heart of what clinical psychopaths do, which is snip communication channels. So when you have soldiers with mobile phones being constantly in touch with what's happening back home, and now I don't just particularly mean the US Army, even though they were heavily involved in the recent wars, but so were other countries as well, right? So were other countries as well. When you have these soldiers communicating and their family telling them maybe how the situation really is, and maybe that there are now signs that the war was not quite so justified as it first seemed or as they first were told, then what you have is actually the free flow of information, and suddenly you cannot use these soldiers like a psychopath would actually use them, which is essentially cannon fodder. So to a psychopath, no individual human being has got any particular right to life. To psychopaths, we're all like objects. So, and this, if the leadership of the military, which by now, as I'm sure all can agree, must be at least partially severely psychopathic, well, they will use that exactly the same sort of thinking on their soldiers. But you can't have these soldiers suddenly network and communicate, because it breaks up the psychopath's power. Of course, if this weren't in deep capture, if these systems weren't in deep capture, then actually any information, true information that gets passed to the bottom that can be used to correct the situation would be a good thing. But when you've got deep capture by clinical psychopaths, then communication is a really bad thing for them, not for anybody else. So as soon as you have sabotage of communication channels, you immediately can conclude that somewhere at the top there is a clinical psychopath, and depending on where the interruption of the communication channels comes from, that's where the psychopath is. So it's very, very easy to find them actually, right? You just have to follow the chain of command and say who gave the order, who is complaining about this. So in reverse, when you have literally these generals going into the onto the mainstream press and complaining about social media use amongst their soldiers, they just outed themselves as little psychos. They're just too stupid to understand. But that's what it is. Because in no other system is communication a bad thing. In fact, open communication makes systems resilient against deep capture. It makes them resilient against bullshit. Yes, sure, you will always have bullshit news being spread, but that can be cycled out. If it's really bad, it can be corrected. But when you've got compartmentalization, and you truncate communication and information flow, that's when the shit gets really big. That's when you have massive problems which then cannot repair themselves. And this is also why we're in the situation we're in now, because essentially the intelligence agencies have not just compartmentalization internally, they have total sealing towards the other, sealing off towards the outside world through the Official Secrets Act, for example, in the UK, and equivalent legislation around the world. And therefore you do not have free information flow. The people who see malpractice inside can't communicate it to the outside to then get help. And similarly, the outside can't see what sort of shit's going on the inside, so they can't correct it. So it gets captured by the clinical psychopaths eventually, which is a statistical process, and it's just a question of time. And then you have a really big fat problem, because the clinical psychopaths at the top will start to maim people and murder them. And that's precisely what we're seeing now with MI5, with the BND, with the CIA and the NDB, and everywhere around the world. They're literally maiming and mutilating people and torturing them to death. And sometimes they're just killing them like straight away. And that's kind of like a really bad thing, but it's not surprising. So, when you have this, the US generals essentially told us how to fight psychopathic systems. They just didn't understand that this is what they were doing. Because when they went public and they said it's a really bad thing that all our soldiers are all the time on Facebook and on Twitter and watch YouTube videos and all that, well, you're the head of the US Army, or any army for that matter. Statistically speaking, you are very likely clinical psychopaths, and you're complaining. Well, I think this is what we all should be doing. If you're any sort of military personnel, not just US, but German, Swiss, UK, South African, Chinese and Russian, please get on Twitter, get on Facebook, be on YouTube, spend a significant amount of time exchanging information and informing yourself to really, cut the water from these complete psychopaths. So, they already told us how to fight them, we just have to listen carefully. So communication channels is also how you fight psychopathic systems. You have to open the floodgates to communication, have an open flow of information, left, right and center, up and down, and let the system repair itself. It will. So that's number one, how to fight these psychopathic systems. Then another one, I think, is exposing them. Have literally not just any sort of communication, have targeted exposure. When something is really, really bad, make it public. Make it public all the time. Expose it. Just put it out there. Of course they're going to get upset, but it's already out there. So let's spread it. End of story. And here, I would like to start this exposing. Essentially, that's what I'm doing here. Everything that they do to me, I will just expose it online, and it's out there, and I know that thousands of victims are suffering from the same thing. So exposing is a really good one. Now, I can also give you definite examples, because one way they terrorize people, with they I always mean the intelligence agencies. So, and by the way, if you haven't watched the video and you're surprised why my behavior, my tone of voice and my language might be quite colloquial, it's because one of the ways how you also fight psychopathic systems is just like how you fight psychopaths, which is with total disrespect. Okay, so I will be in this video, I will show utter and total disrespect towards these systems, and I will make it clear just how little respect I have to underline this. And I'm sorry if it annoys you, and I'm sorry if you're sensitive about bad language, but right now it's really required that I do this. So, exposing bullshit in the intelligence agencies. Well, one of the things that they terrify people with, and it ties in with tricking and conning people, essentially sabotaging their life and conning them and then destroying their life. And I think that is a crime. It is a crime, and therefore I shall expose it. One of the ways that they do it is literally to come in and modify your radios whilst you're out from the house. They'll come into your flat, they'll just break in, because they can do that, and they will modify your radios. Now, there are very many ways you can modify a radio to play up, but there's very simple ways as well. I'm not 100%, I can't exactly remember, my practicals in physics, and I'm not an engineer, so we didn't have them, but I've seen a script for how to build a radio. But if I'm not mistaken, then in principle it should be just as easy as having a tunable little resistor somewhere in the circuit board, which you just swap quickly, and then you can remote steer that little resistor, and then you can tune what station you actually pick up at your own will. If you can do that, which is very, very easy indeed, then what you can do is remote control this radio and simply switch it to another station. Then have a little car or little emitter somewhere nearby, and then you can make that radio pick up the station that you're broadcasting as opposed to the station that it's purporting to be. Now, when you play this game, you can play havoc with people's perceptions, because you can make them think like the radio is talking to you, but actually it's just some dickhead from MI5 or the BND, right? And so on and so on. And that this has been done, I can confirm myself. They have modified my kitchen radio for sure, because the kitchen radio just happened to just say my name, and I was like, oh, okay. And then also my car radio was modified, and they played around, and they had threatening songs played to me, and then the display changed, and yada 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 yada. Okay, that's all really nice, but also really daft, really. They also put on like entire really informative radio programs where, you know, this is how one of the first times I actually heard about electromagnetic weapons. You know, they just explained how all these things and tried to pass me lots and lots of information. And I was just thinking, hang on a second, most radio programs are fucking shit most of the time. And suddenly there's this like 1 hour program that's really informative. I don't think so. So I've never heard a really informative 1 hour show on a radio program, but they just happened to broadcast it as I was driving back from Zurich back to Munich, thinking, yeah, that's, you know, it's not going to be obvious at all, but unfortunately it is. So, you know, you get these like messages broadcast to you over the radio from these idiots, and then, you know, you're meant to go like, oh, really? Yeah, and then you hopefully do, because that will please them, like the earth. But anyway. And then I also went to this court case called Philip Kerr versus MI5, and Philip Kerr actually talked to one of the British intelligence whistleblowers, and this person confirmed that, yeah, actually this is what, you know, MI5 actually do. They, turns out they hired literally like armies of DJs to put on fake radio shows and then play them out to victims, right? And then they will record a radio show, pretend it's like the BBC or something, and then play it to people in their homes or their cars or wherever there's a fucking radio. Wow. It's like amazing, right? This is like so fucking amazing. It just blows your mind. And yeah, and that's what they do. So if your radio talks shit to you, or says your name or something, I would recommend you record it. Record it, you know. If you have some device that can record it that's not Wi-Fi and cannot be tampered with remotely, the better. You know, so you maybe next to your mobile phone also have a dictaphone or something, some sort of audio recorder that's detached from the internet. Record this bullshit and then just complain about it, take them to court, you know, or just complain to the IPT, the Investigatory Powers Tribunal. But this is the sort of utter bullshit they do. Why is that important? Well, because it's sabotage. It is sabotaging someone's life. It's sabotaging someone's mental health. And frankly, it's total wank. Right? So we're either talking, again, you know, normal, it's not. Useful, it most certainly is not. So it's either weaponized, you know, moronic stuff, or it's a psychopathic wank. And then it's down to the actual situation to decide if it's B or C, you know. But for example, they did that with me, with Philip Kerr. MI5 just harassed the hell out of the poor man, and essentially in the end they you know, manipulated his car radio, and his car radio would always play the same song, right? And all radios around him would always play the same song, and in the end he was joking with his driver and said, oh, you know, they should put on this song, and then the song would be put on by MI5, right? Okay, so we've exposed that, right? So this whole radio bullshit, you know, I wish they would just fucking sack their stupid DJs. The reason why this is important, because it also ties in with the entire street theatre and gaslighting that MI5 do to literally get at people's mental health, to destroy their psychology, their psychological well-being, their trust as well. You can't trust your radio. I mean, God, it's not like we would ever trust the radio, right? Ever again. Or the, you know, the BBC for that matter. Of course, that's not the problem. But still, you do get, you know, disconcerted, and you have this feeling of being played with, you know, and essentially people ganging up on you, which is exactly what it is. So it's very, very bad for people's mental health. So that idiotic bullshit has to be exposed. And also, I think when you have austerity and disabled people literally kill themselves out of despair because their benefits were cut, I think the people of the UK, but the same also applies to other places in Europe, should really take umbrage at the fact that we have these dickheads at the intelligence agencies essentially paying oodles of money to fake DJs to put on bullshit, right? That is not okay. Given the situation we're in, it's so not okay on so many levels. It has to be exposed. Okay. Now, street theatre, right? Now the thing with the radios is a form of gaslighting, right? Playing with your perception and so on. It's a form of sabotage and psychological terror. Then there's also the street theatre. And the people who don't really know what street theatre is like, I was trying, I mean, I do have clips myself of street theatre, but because you can actually see the faces of the agents rather well, I don't really want to post them up online. I would like to keep that for my court case. But I did find one instance, which was actually on the homepage of The Independent, where actually people have put on street theatre. And they even say in the video that's on the Independent's website, this is street theatre. Now, what is so very strange about this, and the link is below, so you don't just have to take my word for it, but I will show you this clip because I want everybody to understand. Those people who are not exposed to street theatre by our idiot intelligence agencies cannot possibly fathom the bottomless idiocy that you're exposed to when you witness street theatre. And if you're normal, and you're not a psycho and you're not a weaponized moron, you cannot mentally sink to these low levels, right? So it's really hard to convey that. But thank God for The Independent, I did find an example where you can actually stare into this bottomless pit of utter brain-dead degeneracy. For real. So the link is the following. Have a look below. It's on the Independent website, and it is called YouTube Prank. This was an article on the 8th of March 2016, so earlier, just about a year ago. And it says, YouTube pranksters condemned after bottling woman in front of domestic violence victims for social experiment. And I will say that slowly again. So, if you go to that article that I've linked below, you will see a little video. And what this video shows is essentially a protest. It's an anti-domestic violence protest. So you have a lot of these women who are protesting. I think it's also funding cuts and so on. So domestic violence, you know, if you're not totally living behind the moon, you'll realize it is a big problem. And when you've got a country in a recession like the UK, and you've got a huge, sometimes like decades-long economic downturn, then domestic violence is going to get worse because people are stressed. It brings out the worst in them, financial problems and so on, make people aggressive. So domestic violence is a huge problem in the UK. On top of what it would be, it's also because of the economic crisis. So this is not the time to be joking about domestic violence, if there ever is a time to be joking about domestic violence. But for some reason you have young people who, let me tell you, having watched these fucking gang stalkers now for half a decade, in terms of their age, squarely into what MI5 seems to be recruiting in the droves right now, since their budget doubled after 2003 and their headcount tripled. So they have to recruit an awful lot of young people to even triple their headcount, right? Okay. So you have a lot of these teenage idiots being recruited by MI5. And then MI5, as we know, is also, like all other intelligence agencies, staging false flags, running social experiments, running psyops, bullshitting people, right? And then, presumably, you have to have these teenage idiots being taught how to bullshit people. And when you just read the article on the Independent site and you take it by face value, it seems to be somehow suggesting to us that there's this YouTube channel that just thinks up pranks and specifically runs social experiments on people for the sake of a YouTube channel. Now, these things do exist, I am aware, but I want you, and it's all about clustering. When you're detecting bullshit from the intelligence agencies, it's never just one clue. You have to look for clusters. It's always clusters. When people are lying, when people are faking it, and you can't tell straight away, you can tell when it's clusters, when many things are very odd in series. So let's look for clusters. Number one is, this is a rather odd thing, and they are telling us that it's a YouTube channel, and they're putting on this prank, and for social experiment. So hang on a second. Before, it's pranksters. So the beginning of the title is pranksters, YouTube pranksters. But then at the end of the title, within the Independent, it's already a social experiment. I don't think that morons running idiotic YouTube channels think about social experiments very much. So you kind of gave the game away there, didn't you? And remember that the Independent, like all major newspapers, is really an MI5 newsletter, so we know that by now, right? Okay, but social experiments, well, that sounds more like what the intelligence agencies are doing, no? Okay, so that's already the premise. It's like, something just doesn't end up. And now I encourage you to, I'm not going to say any more about that. Please pause the video when I say, and then just watch the clip and try to pick out absolutely everything that you find really, really odd. This is a clip where it was videoed what these people actually did. And remember, it's a protest, a genuine protest against domestic violence and the financial cuts associated with supporting victims of domestic violence. It's serious shit, and then that stuff is staged. So please pause my video now and have a look. So, what do you think? What did you pick out? Well, when I watched that video, I picked out a lot of things. Number one, the entire thing is meant to be staged. This guy's getting really angry, like playing, and then this woman, she's like bottled, and apparently it's a social experiment, which presumably fuck knows what it's for, but presumably to watch maybe to check how women who are protesting against domestic violence would react when they're witnessing an act of man on woman violence. Okay, or maybe there's some extra layers. Maybe there's like this is what's actually happening here, and then they're testing something else that's here, but they don't actually tell you to make it like in the back. Fuck only knows. Doesn't matter, because what we are out for is not to take it on face value, to actually take out the odd things. Now, what's really, really odd, and that struck all women present. So this guy bottles this woman with a bottle made out of sugar. So hopefully she isn't hurt, but she's acting, and she falls down on the floor. Okay, and then what happens is that these women, right? And most women don't just spontaneously go and protest against domestic violence, because there's so many things to protest about. So the women who are at this protest will most likely either have been affected by domestic violence themselves, or they know somebody they care about who has. So when this guy does it, in the video you can literally see this entire crowd of women suddenly turn on the guy. And it's priceless. It's priceless, because I'm not sure if it's part of the experiment, but I have to say, as I'm hearing this guy, he goes to extremely high pitch, which to me very much sounds like a genuine sign of distress. In other words, this guy is literally shitting himself, because suddenly you have an entire crowd of women, and some of them are holding like wooden signs, right? And they only have to take these wooden signs and jam them into his bollocks, and it will not be so pleasant. And you can see this guy literally protecting his genitals as he's doing that. So absolutely priceless. And meanwhile, he's shrieking like it's like no, it's a joke, it's a joke, it's a joke. It's all staged. And then he says, "We're making a porno." A porno. Like, a guy who's then defending himself blurts out, "We're making a porno." And he says then about the woman, she's a porn star. She's a porn star. Now, the woman who fell to the ground, she does look really attractive, and yes, she could be a porn star. But hang on a second. Didn't The Independent tell us that these were YouTube pranksters? So sorry, did the YouTube pranksters hire a prostitute to do a social experiment? Something about this does not make a fat lot of sense, right? Because, I mean, YouTube pranksters might hire a prostitute for something else, but then social experiments, I mean, that sounds like academic, whereas hiring a prostitute really doesn't. So, okay, so that's already really strange. So she's a porn star. A porn star. So, okay, I know a prostitute and a porn star are technically separate, but, I mean, in London, it really isn't. So, okay. So she's some sort of porn star / prostitute, and when he's protecting his own genitals and is shrieking, he says, "We're making a porno," and she's a porn star. She's just faking it. She's, it's just acting. She's a porn star. Okay. Right. And then you can also see the reaction of these women, because they're like, "What?" And then one lady, she says like, "What? Like at a place like this? As a protest like this?" So there's somebody, and if you look at the faces of the women and like the actual micro expression of like, You know, that's kind of like hard to fake. I mean, some of them could have faked it, some of them could have been part of the crowd actually controlling it, but there are some expressions, if you watch the video many times, there are some which I find genuine, right? I mean, they could have fooled me if they were staged. And you have literally going, and with these women going like, what the fuck is this? Right? Like, what the fuck is this? And this is priceless, because at that point, he also says, this is street theater. Street theater. Now, hang on a second, guys. Because we had pranksters, a prank, we had a social experiment, then we had the hiring of prostitutes, and now this is street theater. Somehow this doesn't really fit into your average, like, you know, dudes doing like shitty YouTube channels with pranks. Because the keywords, let's say them again, a prank, a social experiment, porn stars, right, and street theater, it doesn't fit. It just doesn't fit the YouTube channel story. However, if you're taking MI5, it all fits. It's like they're fucking day job training dickheads. That's what they do. Because they'll take some pranksters, as in con artists, right? These are the teenage pranksters MI5 has to train up to them one day, hopefully pull off a really beautiful false flag. Okay, so you have these teenage dickheads being pranksters, con artists. Okay, that's totally MI5. Social experiments, totally MI5. Porn stars, as in honey traps, as in the women who get hired by MI5 are also run as either prostitutes or, you know, in the end will hopefully be used as honeypots. And the honeypot business was also, I think, in the leaked documents by Edward Snowden, wasn't it also part of the J-Trig, you know, leaked, you know, Cabinet of Horrors or something, the honeypots? I think it was. So honeypots, as in porn stars / prostitutes, are totally MI5. And in street theater is exactly what all the victims of gang stalking by the National Surveillance Network complain about. So I'm very sorry, but we've got like 4 clusters here, and 5, which is essentially that this whole fucking thing doesn't make any freaking sense, because it's like, you know, you have this bullshit staged at an anti-domestic violence rally. So we've got 5 clusters, 5 markers that don't make any sense in the official story, and then make total sense in the MI5 world, right? So what you actually see there, and I mean, I am 100% convinced that these guys, the young people there, and also the cameraman and, you know, some others, are MI5. They are MI5 trainees training how to pull off a psyop. Okay, so that aside, and I hope to fuck that those agents' career at MI5 is being cut short by having their fucking mug on The Independent. I really hope so, because this bullshit has to come to an end. If you see those faces, that lady, that guy, and any of the other faces appear again somewhere, remember this video. Okay, that aside. I can also call out German trainee agents as well to just make it equal, but here we are now. So, you have street theater. So this is MI5 street theater. These people are training, and they're doing MI5 street theater. And just look at how fucking idiotic it is. These people are weaponized morons. But someone staged a social experiment being a psychopathic wank, and then also hired a porn star. That's very psychopathic wank. So we have some, you know, senior handlers in the background having a bit, you know, knocking one off of having Pretty Girl there, and then staging a day out, you know, like a field day with the new trainee dickheads doing shit. That's what it is. So anybody who doesn't understand what street theater looks like, imagine you're at the rally and you're not one of these like dickheads or total psychos. You're just there watching it, and it has been done to you because maybe you know, when you leant down to help the woman up or something. So you have somehow been gotten involved into this MI5 bullshit by no fault of yourself. And now imagine you are trying to tell your family that this has been done to you. You know, if you say, okay, this was at that street theater, and these idiots did that, you know, your family would be like, what a bunch of morons. Okay, now if you're a victim of the intelligence agencies won't just stage this once, because normal people maybe see this once at a rally and then never again in their life, thank goodness. But if you're a victim of the intelligence agencies, they will use your life to train these dickheads every single day of the week, using you and your life as a prop. And they've done that to me. The BND has trained children as young as what to me looked like 8, using my life as a prop. Children. Okay? But that was just, they only had special like kiddie trainee days at the BND, right? You know, that happened only once or twice that I saw that. But I did see like teenage and, you know, guys and women in the early 20s like all the fucking time. All the time. And that's the sort of street theater bullshit that you'll be exposed to every day. But now ask yourself, is that not a totally psychopathic system that puts on shit like that? And isn't the reaction of the women totally justified when they go, what? And then this woman even goes, this is nuts. Yes, it's nuts. That's what MI5 is. They're nuts. It is fucking nuts. We don't need this in the country, in the UK, in Germany, in Switzerland. We don't need it in any fucking country. This system is totally nuts. It's totally psychopathic. You've senior handlers hiring porn stars because essentially MI5 is in deep capture by dickheads. Right? That's what it shows. No other fucking way can you have that being pulled off. MI5 Street Theatre published in The Independent, and I hope to God that The Independent published it because they also had enough of this shit. I really hope so. But that's the shit we're dealing with. So I'm sorry that I'm swearing, but this is just how low this stuff is. Because if you're a victim, you also have issues in your life which are on par with domestic violence. You have serious issues, and meanwhile you have these cartwheeling, you know, morons, a total Muppet show put on by, you know, these idiots. And it's being staged in your life all the fucking time. Every week, every month of every year for years. Do we need that? I really don't think so. So expose it. That's why. We are going to expose it. Anybody who wants to understand what, you know, street theatre looks like, have a look at that. Now, what this actually shows is that actually, as I keep saying, MI5 and MI6 are in deep capture by morons and by psychopaths. Now, what to do about it? Well, the only thing you can do is essentially a system pivot. You have to have internal restructuring, dear MI5, dear BND, and dear NDB, because I also saw it in Switzerland, by the way. Right? I saw it in every single country, in Germany, in the UK, and Switzerland, just the same. You are doing bullshit. Every normal person who's straight in the head just goes, what? Do you think this is actually justified, what you're doing? So really, all I can say is that it's time. It's time to call in the consultants at MI5 and MI6, hey? And then you're laughing no more. I don't think I have seen a single company where the people running it came out with a happy face when the chaps from McKinsey descended down. Because if you think you're psychopaths, they are psychopaths too. But they get you sacked, you see. You wish you'd never been born when you're sitting through hours and hours of PowerPoint presentations, right? So that's what you have to look forward to. Sooner or later, in not so distant future, also MI5 and MI6 will have it done to them the McKinsey way, and then they're laughing no more. Anyway, so this is it. This is essentially psychopathic systems, how to fight them. We have communication, which is very, very important to fight psychopaths. And then it's about exposing them. That's also a form of communication to the public. Then there's also really, really bad stuff, which is, MK Ultra. I want to talk to you about Monarch programming and MK Ultra, but I don't actually want to talk about it itself because it is just very, very sensitive. Essentially what we had is these mind control, mind bending programs that are based on trauma-based mind control, essentially being done to thousands of people. And as I understand it, for trauma-based mind control to work particularly effectively, you have to do it to children. And the younger the better. I think it has to be done, well, I heard different things, but, you know, done before the age of 3 and then reinforced several times until until they are 6 years old or 8 years old and so on. And then you have somebody whose personality is shattered for good. But it's not for good. It's not irreversible at all by any means. So if you are an agent and you have been put through this, and you had all this, I mean, I don't even remember all the names of the programs, but Monarch, MK Ultra, all this stuff is all part of it, but there are many variants of it. But they all depend on trauma-based mind control. Well, what they're trying to do is shatter your mind and then control parts of it. And it's really important that that gets repaired. You know, you have to regain control over yourself, over your entire personality. And then what they're trying to do is essentially program in alters, and give you other personalities that they program in. Now, when you've been put through that, it is very, very difficult, but it's not impossible. But what that falls into, and how to fight these psychopathic systems, because essentially psychopaths and these psychopathic systems that have done it to thousands and thousands of victims in every country, because all this is not just specific to the UK, it has been done in Switzerland, has been done in Germany, in every single country of the world. What that ties in with is essentially empathy and healing. Okay, it really is, because in a sense, if you want to get in touch with those parts of your personality that have been compartmentalized away from you, you essentially have to, well, I always call it, you have to go sideways. You know, you have to kind of, like, the direct way doesn't work, so you have to kind of, you know, inch your way in and bit by bit essentially regain ground. It works differently for different people, but what you most certainly have to do is, when you do that, you have to feel safe, okay? Because essentially you have to do the opposite of what they did to you. When they first shattered your personality, when they compartmentalized your brain, they were trying to scare you, do horrific acts. People are made to watch the murder of animals, the murder of young children as well. Really horrific stuff. I mean, we're talking murder here, okay? And then they also use guilt. They're using certain mechanisms that normal people have, and some psychopaths have them too as well. So you can also mind shatter psychopaths' mind and make them even more lethal, control the psychopath. And all that has been done to people, but ultimately the key is that when you want to regain that ground, you have to feel safe. You have to be in a completely different state. And it's important to do that because it's fighting the psychopathic system. Because as far as I can tell, I mean, electronics aside, you know, the old electromagnetic mind control stuff aside, these sort of programmings are the most deadly. And I'm sure that there are ways to do that using drugs and other means that I can't even dream about. But ultimately it comes down to the same thing. It's about, you know, mind compartmentalization. Using, you know, horrific stuff and trauma, using primordial fear, and essentially the fact that your brain will also protect itself from very negative experiences. But at the same time, when you experience something negative, the you know, kind of synaptic links will be very, very strong for evolutionary reasons. So you learn that sort of event very easily, whereas nice events you don't learn that easily. But either way, you can have this, you know, dissolved. One way people manage to crack it is to remember. I do not advise at all. Some people use drugs to try to remember. I do not advise that at all, simply because drugs will put you in a weak position. You're at the mercy of the drugs. You're not in control. But when you really want to access that, you have to feel as strong as you possibly can. So one of the ways I think works, and I'm not an expert at all, But one of the things I know that works, I try to do kind of this sort of stuff on myself, but for protective reasons. When you're doing it yourself, you're not at the mercy of somebody else, so you can kind of, you know, you're safer. But I have managed to essentially compartmentalize bits of myself, trying to work more efficiently, and then lose the ability to do certain things. For example, write about the stuff that I was thinking. So it's pretty fucked up. To anybody who doesn't understand this, they will think, woo! But it really works. It works because it's using certain protective mechanisms of the brain, certain, certain things, features of the brain which have evolved, you know, to essentially help us. And if you use them right, you can actually do that to yourself. I don't recommend anybody do that unsupervised, right? No, 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 no. But the other way, through that experimenting on myself, I think there's one way to do that which is safe. And this is essentially using emotional resonance. Okay. So, and this is all part of fighting psychopathic systems, because that's the power they have over you, and you can overcome that power essentially using something that is, it's akin to resonance in physics, actually. And resonance is one of the most powerful things we have. And it also works emotionally, because your brain also has some sort of resonance that you can use to access these bits. And it will be better than using drugs, because then you're not weak, you're actually empowered. You are the strongest that you possibly can be. And I advise using resonance to actually get to that, you know, to access those bits, not drugs. Drugs might be quicker, but I'm not sure about the end result. Whereas here, you're safe because you're strong. So the way to do that, and you really have to play around, because everybody's programming is very, very different, but in a sense, you have to regain control of your entire brain, everything. It's yours, it's part of you, it's not theirs. And everything that has been done to you has been done to you. It's not your fault. You haven't done it. Whatever they try to induce, if people were murdered in front of your eyes, if animals died in front of your eyes, you didn't do it. They did. You're not guilty. There's nothing wrong with you. You're perfect. They did it. But what they did is not part of you. And that's the key. It's not part of you. So they try to essentially stab a dagger into your brain and cause an injury, and then use the scarring. This is pretty much what happens, because you've got scarring. The brain tries to kind of like protect it, scars it, and then you can't access that bit because it's kind of scarred up, and it doesn't work the same way. This is really wishy-washy way of explaining it, but that's what underlies it, I think, at the core. Now, if you want to get back, the way you can do that, and that's the way how I managed to merge myself with myself after I compartmentalized myself, is the following. You have to find something that you first of all, you don't have to try. You do it by not trying. And I explain how. So first of all, you get into a situation and into a frame of mind where you feel safe. So when you're trying to do this, make sure you're safe. Be somewhere where you feel totally safe, where you totally feel one with yourself, and you feel at peace. And there's nothing disturbing you. Nothing that scares you, nothing that disturbs you. You're warm, you're safe, you're well fed, everything is okay. And then what you can do is, once you're safe and you feel safe and you're comfortable, you now try to get even more powerful. You actually try to get strong, not just safe, you try to get active and strong. And you try to essentially feel your own energy pulsating in a very good way. And it has to become ever harder and harder and harder as you're more and more powerful. And that's how you actually build up resonance. Now, how to trigger that? Well, there are different ways, depending on if you're visual, if you're audio, person, what you respond to. If you need an external trigger, music helps. Music actually is very good, because the beat pattern can sometimes, also entrain your brain in a good way. So if you take music that you find very activating, very empowering, use that to actually get into an emotional state where you resonate with the music. In a sense, it makes you happier and happier the longer you listen to it, and you really go woo, inside. And that's what you want, because this feeling of, oh my God, I'm resonating with it, it's exactly that what I'm saying. It's resonating with it. You are resonating with it. You are responding to it. You can also do that if you're thinking about people you maybe love a lot, with whom you also are on one wavelength. So in a sense, you're resonating with them. It makes you feel really strong when you think about them, and so on and so on. And it's essentially about taking that as a first entry to starting to resonate with something really positively, and then keep increasing the resonance to feel ever more powerful. Keep adding things to it that make you feel really strong, like events that really made you feel very strong, memories, anything that's really empowering. And essentially, when you're in that state, try to let go. And it's literally, that's why you have to feel safe, because at some point, if anything disturbs your brain will get on the case. But it mustn't. Your brain, if it has nothing to do, because everybody's brain keeps ticking over, there's no brain that just stops. If your brain feels empowered and has nothing to do, and you let go, it will automatically go to what's most urgent, which is repair. It will by itself go to repair. That's just how it is. So that's why, for example, when you had something traumatic during the day, you might dream about it again, and that's your brain essentially practices again. It like repairs, and it goes through a practice round of playing through that experience again to prepare you. You know, it does some internal learning by itself. But it's a form of repair and a form of learning. And when your brain is scarred up, if you're really empowered, at first you will not notice, but your brain will naturally try to access it. It will try to repair. And it will not do it the first time round, because essentially you're scarred up. But eventually it will start, it's like gnawing away at, scar tissue. It will start breaking that down. And when you're really empowered and really free, and you have to let your mind run. Not think about anything, just daydream. Just let it go. Be really happy and just let it daydream and let your brain roam. Eventually, it will do it, and this is why it's the best way to do it, because your brain will do it at its own speed. It will just take as much as it can digest. So you have to do this quite a lot, okay? You have to practice it, but the more you do it, the more you actually will learn how to make yourself resonant and make yourself resonate, and essentially make yourself, empower yourself, and reclaim. It's about reclaiming those parts of your brain, okay? This is really important, actually. This is extremely important, because it's at the core of this really psychopathic system that we're dealing with. It goes to the very heart of these psychopaths' power over key people and over you. But that's what you have to do. And when you feel really empowered, then maybe some faint images will start flashing. And it could be that the first time that they will flash through your mind, it will make your entire resonance just collapse, and you suddenly wake up. You step out of the state and you feel either really scared, really stressed, or anything else, right? Really sad, depressed. But it's okay, because that's when you repair. That's when you work through it. And your brain essentially took a piece of that scar tissue and thought, right, we're dealing with this now. And it digests it. And then maybe it does it 2 or 3 times, but eventually it will not come up again, and then it will take something else. So it's actually a misunderstanding to think that if you're suddenly really sad and really scared, that's a bad thing. It's not. It's only a bad thing if you stay like that, right? But that's why you have to learn how to build up resonance yourself, because then when you had enough of being sad, you can take the music again and try to learn to make yourself strong again. And then your brain will take another bit and start digesting it. But then to think, oh, I keep getting really sad after this is idiotic. You haven't understood that getting sad and working through that is the healing. It's the repair that you're meant to be doing. Do you see? That's how you repair. Of course you're going to get sad. Of course you're going to get scared, because you've been put through trauma. What you're doing is you're working through, kind of like safe versions of that. But that's how you repair. But the very important thing is that every single time you're brought down by this, you know how to get back up. And that's why I say, first get safe and learn how to make yourself resonate. Teach yourself how to make yourself feel really empowered. And this can be triggered by beautiful paintings if you're really visual, or the memory of beautiful colors, or the way how I mean, people can access this through a million ways. It very much depends on your brain, right, and your experience. It could be just the memory of how the sun, fell through a window and onto, I don't know, a pet or person you really love, and then the warm feeling that you have suddenly fills you. Anything like that, anything that suddenly fills you and makes you feel really good, really calm, and really strong, is resonance. It's when your brain, your entire brain, essentially entrains onto it. It locks onto this, and you can make your brain fire on all cylinders along those lines in sync. That's resonance. And because suddenly your entire brain is firing along those lines, more or less, I mean, this is what it feels like, right? Your entire brain is suddenly just filled with this thought. This thing of feeling filled with it it's kind of pretty accurate, because suddenly your synapses and your different regions of your brain will start firing. And that's the key, because you don't know where that stuff that got compartmentalized away resides. But when you get into this phase of just daydreaming and you let your brain fire on all cylinders at its own, pattern, that's when it will naturally gravitate to the bits that take repair, that require repair. So this is how to fight. We've gone through quite a lot, and there is an awful lot of other stuff to go through, because fighting psychopathic systems is at the heart of this, right? It really is at the heart. Now, what we discussed is essentially communication is really good, even if your generals or your handlers or your superiors tell you otherwise. If they tell you otherwise, that's because they're psychos or idiots. So ignore them, keep communicating. The other thing is also expose every item of bullshit, because we're now cycling the world to a better version. We really don't need this. So sorry if I blew a leck into MI5's radio manipulation plans. It's out there now. It's bullshit. We can all move on. Think of something else. Okay, we really don't need this crap. And then the other thing is really the empathy and healing. And MK Ultra and Monarch programming and all that sort of stuff is a very extreme form, but in a sense that's the extreme end, but the remedy for that works for everything else, less severe as well, right? When you're talking about mental healing, then empathy is really good, and then internal emotional resonance, so brain resonance, positive resonance in that sense, is also really good and very empowering, and it does wonders for healing as well. So that's as much as I would like to say. I'll make another video because there's a lot more to get through, but that's enough for now. Thank you for listening, and I hope I could be of assistance in one way or another. Thank you very much, and bye for now.